this course. Now we're going to add some JavaScript. We're going to add some JavaScript. I hope you have fun with it, with JavaScript. I hope you have some fun with JavaScript. So now, with JavaScript, this is going to be an interesting part. So let's go back to our code. So remember, we created this index.js file, but now the first thing that we need to do is to link it. So we have to link it for it to run after, for it to be able to select everything that is in here, or to be interactive with everything that is in here. Let's call it after everything has been rendered. So we're going to say script, then we're going to say source, and then the source of our, since they're in the same folder, we're just going to say index.js, but we need to close it, and then we just say psh, there we have it, done. We have our JavaScript. And then to just show that our JavaScript is being called, let's just say console.log. Then we're just going to say, maybe I'll say hello. What else? This is like sort of like printing on our console. I'll show you where our console is at. So hello world. Save. Now let's go to our browser. Let's see if our index is being called, index.js is being called. So now to check everything that is consoled, we use this on our dev tool. So now let's refresh and see. Yay, our JavaScript has been called. Now that we have, like, we're able to console to call our JavaScript, the next part is to now start with the interactive part. So the first thing that we're going to do is to go to our JavaScript. Let's go to our JavaScript. Now, what we need to do to be able to click on all these blocks, we need to select all the blocks. Let's go to our code, then now to be able to interact with all these squares, what we will do is we'll select them, all of them. Let's select them by, let's say, we'll create a variable called, this is how we create a variable and assign a value to it. So we'll say, we'll call the variable squares, and we're going to say equal to documents, or not documents, document dot query select all. We selecting all, don't use query selector. If you just say query selector, it will select the first one. So with query select all, it will select all of the squares. Now we're going to select our square using dot, the same way we selected it here with dot square. We're going to use it dot square, and then let's use semicolon. Now to show that we have, I'm just going to do this one console, but maybe later on we'll create another console and all those things. So now the first thing that we're going to do is say console.log to show those squares, and then let's save. Let's go to our browser. In our browser, there we have it. It has selected all our squares. Now what we need to do next is to be able to add an event for when all these buttons, like these blocks, are clicked or selected. So now to do that, we're going to go back to our code. We're going to add an event listeners to all the squares, but the one thing we have to do is to iterate throughout all the squares. You have seen that we got like 9 squares, and we can't just do it at once. We have to iterate through each. So to iterate through each, we're going to say squares dot, and then we'll say for each, because we're selecting for each, and then we're going to say for each square, the class of, for each square, and then we create a function that is used to iterate. Then for each square, we're going to say square dot add event listener, and that event listener is click. We have many event listeners. We have input, we have many key app, we have a lot of event listeners. You learn them throughout your journey of JavaScript. And then that event, what we're getting from that event, and inside there, let's just console something. .log, then we're just going to say E. We're going to print that what we get from whenever we click. And let's save it. Let's go to our code, to our browser, and let's refresh. Let's see. When I click here, it shows. It will also show me the target that I clicked on. See, it shows me. I clicked a square, and let's click another one. It will show me. I click a square, which is under div, which is under that and that and that. Now the next part is to, maybe let's say when the user clicks on this one, we should add this X here on this one. We should add an X on this one, right? Let's go to our code, and then what we need to do is to say for this current target, we're going to say e dot current target, which will select the exact block or element that is being selected. We're going to say on its class list, we're going to maybe add another class. Add, which we use this method dot add, which is for it comes with this class list, and then we're going to add a class of, remember the player is X, right? So there we have it. So now, oh, I'm sorry. Inside here, we're going to say for this current target, we're going to get the class list, and we say dot add. This is the class list method. Dot add. We're going to say add X. Let's save. Let's see what happens. Let's go to our browser. Let's refresh. Let's click here. Add. There it shows. But now let's make it look much better. Like when someone hovers on this, let's show that the cursor should be maybe like the one that shows when you are clicking on links and all those things. The pointer, the cursor should be a pointer. So let's do this by going to our, let's go to our square, like to our CSS, to our CSS and code. Let's go to our CSS, and we're going to select here. Then I'll say cursor pointer, and cursor will show a pointer. Let's save. Let's go back to our browser. On our browser, let's refresh. We're gonna refresh. Let's refresh. Now let's see. See, now it looks much better. You can whenever the user is clicking, they know that, oh, this is meant to be clicked on upon. So now the thing is, what happens if I click on this? Like, see, it doesn't look good. If I click on a block that already has maybe an O or an X, like you can't be clicking on a thing that already has something. So we need to cater for that. So what we need to do before we add the class X, we need to check. Let's go to our code. Let me just refresh this. Okay, if look at this doesn't look good. So what we're going to do is to first make sure that that block or that square doesn't have any class on it at the moment. So what we're going to do is to go to our code again, our JavaScript. Now what we're going to do before here, we're going to say we're going to create another one. Let's say is picked. We're going to check if it is picked. We're going to say picked, then we're going to say it is equal to e dot current target. We're checking if the current target is picked. The current target is picked if it has a class of X or an O. So now that's what we're going to do. If it is picked, it won't allow the user to pick that box. So now, so what happened is we're going to say dot class list. We're going to check that class list, and we're going to say dot contains. This is another that is another method that comes with class list. Now we're going to check if it has a class of X, but we also need to check if it has a class of O. So we're just going to copy this. This is like OR. If it has it contains a class of X, or it contains a class of O. And then we need to have a condition to say if, only if it is false, only if this is false, which is we will negate by using this exclamation mark. If this is false, then when it gets to this point, it will turn true, and then it will go inside here. Only if it is not picked, then it will go in. So now let's save. Let's see what happens. Let's go to our browser. Let's see. Let's refresh. Now it doesn't select. We can also see here it won't select anything. Let's expand the square. So it will only add an X only if the thing is X. There. So now let's refresh here, and let's go to our, let's get started with our game. So now let's go to our HTML, and let's just remove this, because the game, when you start, it has to be a clean slate. It has to start on a clean slate. So let's save this. Now we have saved it, right? It is starting on a clean slate. Let's see if that's how it shows on our browser. And that's how it shows on our browser. The slate is clean, but we can't just play one player. Like, the computer also has to play, obviously. So now we need to, every time the player plays, we need to also say, hey, the computer, please play. It's your turn now, right? Now we're going to, let's refresh this and then clean slate. Now let's go back to our code. code. Now to do that, right, in our JavaScript, it will be best to create maybe like a function for the computer, like to call our computer, this is your 10. So we're going to create a function. This is how you create a function. And then the name of the function is going to be computer 10. We're going to call it computer 10. I know the naming of my functions and variables may be crazy, but it is quite difficult to get to be able to name things like properly. I even doubt if I'll be able to name my kids right. Okay, enough about that. Now, what we need to do is we need to first check, okay, the computer can please select on a random block, because this is a dumb game, so it will just select on a random block. But at that random block, you should also make sure that that random block doesn't have any sort of like another, it is not picked at already. So this is what we're going to do, right? We're going to say let random, like we're going to create a let's say random square number. Then we're going to we're going to call the math library. It comes with the computer, and then we'll say floor. So it will and then it will say math dot random, and then we'll call the random function, and we times it by 9. Now it will only select for blocks that are from 0 up to 9, or 0 up to, yeah, it will select from 1 up to 9, between 1 and 9, between 1 and 9, 1 and 9. Okay, cool. I'm sorry, it will select for blocks that are 0 and 8, because with indexes like array indexes, they start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Now those are 9 numbers, but they start from 0 up to 8, so it will select from 0 up to 8. Okay, cool. So now what we're going to do, remember we have created these squares, so we're going to select a square that is on that random square number, and then we're going to do it the same here. We're going to say to add it, to give it a class name. So we're just going to take this, copy this, and we paste it here. But now, since it is a computer's 10, we're going to say 0. But if you check here, we didn't call this function, and we have to call this function after this has been picked. So we're just going to copy this. Unlike when you're naming a function, make sure that there's no space here. So let's save this. Let's go to our browser. Let's see if it does work how we intend it to work, right? So now let's refresh. Let's refresh. Now if I click, the computer plays. If I click, the computer plays. If I click, the computer plays. If you check here, the computer won, but the game continues, but we'll deal with that later on. And if you check here, the computer doesn't check if the block has been selected. So now let's make sure that the computer knows that, oh, the block has been selected. How do we do that? We are going to say, we are going to go up here. Now in here, let's say in here, we're going to create an object that will know, okay, the block, these are blocks selected by the player, these are blocks selected by the computer. Now, so in here we're going to say let, maybe let's call it selected squares, right? Squares. But inside the object we're going to say these are blocks. We're going to create a key for X, which is a player, and we're also going to create a key of O, which is the computer. So now what we need to do, right? What we need to do is to say after here, right? After the, to get like after the player has played, we need to add whichever square that he played onto this. So how do we do that? We do that by coming here and say we have to push it, but we don't know which index it is, which number of block, which block number it is. So in here, when you do for each, it will give you an element and also an index. So easy way out for us. So now let's go to let's select this this key and say select square dot X. So since this is an array, what do we need to do? Since it is an array, we come here and say dot push. An array comes with a method called dot push. Then dot push, we push in the number of the index of that block. Then we save. They save that. The next part will be to also do it for this for whenever the square, that is the computer selector square. So what we can just do is copy this, Control C, then after here Control V, then we say we do this here, but instead of pushing it into X, we push it into the blocks for the computer, which is O. But now remember, we have to also check if the block has been selected. So to do that, we're going to pretty much the same way as the like player when they pick. So we will say let is picked, then we're going to say is equal to, what I can say is we'll see if it is in this or in this. So what we're going to say is if and then includes, we're going to check if this array includes the current number, this random square. If it includes this random square, or we just copy this, or this O includes the random number. But now we have, before we select, we have to say if, then we'll say if is picked. If it is not picked, then it can come here. So let's see, let's go and play. But now we have to, the computer has to retry again to pick another number in case this has already been picked. So we'll say else, we'll say, I'll call the computer function again, computer 10 again. Let's call the computer 10 again, and then yes, it will have, this will have a memory leak later on if once we have all the numbers that are selected, but we'll deal with that at a later stage. So now let's go to our our game and see how it looks like at this moment on our browser. Okay, let's refresh this, let's clear this, let's see. I play here and I play here, then I play here, then I play there. See, this is so dumb. Like if it was intelligent, it was going to close in here and then yeah, but this is dumb. As I said earlier on, that this is sort of like a dumb game, but we'll deal, like maybe later on you can make it an advanced one, and then yeah. So if you check here, now we have like memory leak, like it has called so many times with no results because it is just calling itself all over again. So the browser had a way of dealing with it, but now we'll deal with this. We won't have this error later on with this game. So now the next stage here, right? The next stage here is to say, maybe let's make it wait, like before it can even add for this, let's make it wait. So we're going to create a sleep function so that when the player plays, it sleeps a bit, waits a bit, and then yeah, it will be up to you like the time of. So we're going to create a sleeper function. We're going to create it just before here. We're going to call it function, then we'll say it will be a sleep function. Then with this it will have to call in like sort of like it will have to have a parameter of milliseconds that we're going to add. Now with this we're just going to create a promise, an empty promise, like that resolves like set timeout. So we're going to say we're going to return here a new promise. You learn more about promises as time goes on. At this moment, yeah. So now we're going to say we're going to resolve this promise with going to resolve it with a set timeout function that comes with JavaScript. It's a default JavaScript, and we're going to resolve it, and with that milliseconds that we have passed here. So now let's save this. Let's call this this sleep function right before we can add the O on the block. So we're going to say await. Since the promise has, like, we have to wait for the promise to finish running, so we're going to say await maybe, and then call the function sleep. Then we're going to say, let's give it maybe 1 second. One second. Sorry. Now, but this will give an error because to call an await function, await here, you have to make sure that you call it inside an asynchronous function. So async. So we have to say this function is an async function. So let's save. Let's see if there's a delay on each computer play. Now let's go back to our code, to our page, then refresh. Now let's select. See, now it waits for like a second, sort of like it makes an illusion that the computer is thinking. Yeah, but see, its computer is dumb. Like, you should have like picked up this random number. Now I managed to close, like, see. But now we still have this issue. I think let's deal with this issue now. Okay, let's deal with this issue now. So to deal with this issue, the first thing that we need to do is to go and we need to make sure that we are checking if the players won and all that, so that we will be able to stop the game. Okay, cool. We're going to go to our code. In our code we need to know which set of functions, like winning combination do we have. So I've written a set of combination that like show that someone has won. So these are the combination, so we need to check for this combination to make sure that the player has won. So now the next thing is to do is like right after the player picks here, we also need to check the score, and after the computer is played, we also need to check the score again to see if the player the computer has won, or yeah, something like that. So we need to check if the players won here, or if the score matches here, and then after here we also need to check the score here. Now to do this, what we need to do is to go to we have to create another function that is called check score. We're going to say function function, then we call it check score, and then remember we're calling it right here, check score function, then we'll also call it here check score, right? Let's save. Now the next thing is to check the combinations to see if the computer won or the player won. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to see if, and we can only know that the players won if they have or the computers won if they have selected 3 blocks. So the first thing that we need to do is to check if the computer has selected 3 blocks or if the computer has selected 3 blocks. So we're going to start by checking if the player is, let's say the computer is selected, but since we're checking the player score first, let's say if the selected, remember we're checking if this array has 3 blocks selected. So we're going to see dot x dot length, if the length of the array is greater or equal to 3. So from 3 going upwards, we need to check. Now let's see. Then we're going to say to check with this winning combination. Let me collapse this so that it doesn't disturb us. We're going to see if the combination, the combination of the player is found here. So now what we're going to do is to say let 1, and then we're going to check if some of these combination are in this, right? So now we're going to say winning combination dot sum. This is another class that comes with an array. So this one checks if some of these arrays, like some of the elements in an array matches, like was the condition that we're going to have inside there. So now we're going to say sum, and then we're going to say winning combination. We're going to say, okay, this is the first combination. It is going to iterate through all of them. And then winning combination, and then we're going to create this condition. Now inside the condition, we're going to say winning combination dot every, then we're going to say every element is, if every element is included here, if every element on this is included on maybe whatever boxes have been selected by the player. So now we're going to say every combination has been selected, and then we're going to say if every is inside the selected square of x dot, let's say, includes e. We're going to check if let's say for this, for the first one, it was going to go through this and checks if all these are in here, all these are in here, all these are in here. So if they are in there, it means the players won. Now we're going to say console, we're just going to print for now, console player. Let's create a string and say player one. Then let's do the condition first to say if this one here, it means player one, right? Now let's do the same. This will work exactly the same way as the sorry, this looks so ugly. Okay, let's just copy this again. Yeah, there. But now we're checking the length of O, just changing this to O. Then this will be computer one, and then again going to say O here. We're going to save. Now let's run and see if the computer release tells if the player is on or the computer is on. So now back to our browser, refresh, we start. Now the computer plays. Then let's see if the player wins. Yay, the player won, but it will keep going because now we didn't stop it, because I can continue playing and it will just keep telling the players won. Now we also need to stop those things, right? Now what we need to do now is to say, let's have a variable here, and we call that, we have a variable here, and we call that variable let stop game, and then at first we're going to say false, right? Going to call it false. Now if it is like that, we're going to say in here, before it does anything inside here, we're going to say if game has stopped, this should stop running. This computer like this function just stops running. So if the stop game, it should return. Then it means whenever it gets to this point and the stop game is true, it will stop. But we haven't changed the state of this stop game, so we have to change it inside here. We have to tell it to say, we have to say here, we have to say stop game is equal to true, same as in here. So now we know what happened, like the next step here, right? So now let's see if it really does stop the game from continuing. Okay, there we have it, right? Now let's see. Oh, now it is playing this clever. Okay. Now the players won. The computer doesn't play again, but maybe like doesn't play again, right? Let's also try it again. Let's see. I'm going to be dumb. I'm going to act like, oh god, I can't be dumb with this. See, the computer won. So, and the game the game doesn't stop for the player to play now, and the player won and the computer won. It doesn't make sense anymore, right? It doesn't make sense anymore. So let's also add that game stop inside on the turn of the player, which is in here, right? In here we're going to say, and this is not stop game, it shouldn't run. Now let's save this. Let's see if it will play if the computer wins. It will allow the player to play if the computer wins. So let's go to our browser. In our browser, let's try again. Let's see. I'm going to be dumb now and maybe let the computer win. Okay, I'm going to just be dumb. Now the computer wins, right? But now the player can't play anymore. It means the computer has won, right? Let's refresh again. Let's refresh again. Let's now update all, like, okay, let's make a pop-up first to show that the players won and all those things. So to do that, to make sure that the player pop like a pop-up or alert to show that the player is won or the computer has won, let's go to, where do we go? We have to sort of like create another, for this we're going to create another object. We'll call it this, and then scores. We're going to say dish. Let's call it, then let's say player scores. We're going to create a key player score. Then start at 0, and then computer also start at 0. Start at 0 also. So whenever the computer wins, we are going to say, to pick this up and say player then player, scores dot computer dot. So for this one we can just increment, like there's a way of incrementing, and instead of just like saying +1, just say ++. We'll do the same for the player. Player, cool, for the player, and then we just put this alert. There we have it. I think we are good. Oh, let's also print the score to just see how the score changes. Then we'll just console.log. Then we just print out the scores. We'll print out the scores, and then let's go to our page, let's run it, let's see if it is working good. Okay, now let's now refresh the page. I'll play next. Play. Oh no, go there. Oh, damn thing. There it shows that the player has won, right? There the score changes, but that doesn't look that nice, because now if we check here, I'm sure you noticed that it popped up like, oh, after it has notified us that the players won. So to make sure that it does it much better, right, we are going to remove this alert from being inside here. So we are going to do it to say if on check score. So we'll do it after it checks like the scores for all of this, right? So now we're going to say if the game has stopped, if stop game in here, if stop game alert, the first thing we're going to say, let's sleep it a moment to make sure that it is sort of like thinking again. We're going to like sleep for like 1 second again. But now, to know that the player is the one who won, we're going to have, let's say, a variable inside the function. Let's say we're going to give it a name of winner. Then we say it is empty, and then here we'll say winner. On this one it is player who won. I'm going to create a string, a variable with a string player. Let's just copy this, then replace it here, and then we'll do computer. Computer. Now we're going to do the alert here. We're going to say alert. Now we're going to say our message is going. We're going to use the literal using backtricks. We can just populate our winner here, then winner, and this becomes the string. So this winner will depend either this or either that. And remember, this will only run if the inside here it says the game can stop. So now we can say 1, and we don't need to populate the score anymore. I'll go to the page and show what needs to happen. So if we go to the browser, right, we already have this part where it needs to show the score for each user. You have to show the score for each user. So instead of consoling, we just need to display it, since the player won't have to need to go, because they won't be a developer, so they won't have to go to the console to see the score, and they will have to know, okay, the score will populate here. So now we need to populate the score here. But if you check here, if you check, this is sort of like similar to this. We need to have like a separate identifier that will set this separate from this. So that's where we need to get started with IDs. So now we are going to give we're going to give on our HTML, we're going to give this score here for computer an ID of computer. We will select using ID computer score, and this one will have an ID of player score. Then now we can go back to our JavaScript, and after it has played, it will then populate these two. It will update them. So to update them, we are going to have, let's say, we are going to have to say, going to select those things and say document dot get element by ID. Now it is only going to select that ID that we have selected. And then remember, we have computer score and we have player score. So I'm going to copy this, then I'm going to paste it there, and I'm going to say .inner HTML. This is going to change inner HTML. This is going to change the text of the score, and then now we're going to say scores.player. It will get the value of that player. And then now let's also do the same for computer. Let's save. Now let's see if it really does populate the score. Let's go to our page, let's refresh, let's play. Oh, sorry, it was still something is wrong. Now that's where we come to our, oh, it is because of this await. It will tell you where the error is. Syntax error on line 82, which is this 82. I'm sure some of you have guessed it. For you to be able to call, sorry, I also have a typo error. This winner has to be just true ends. So we have to if we are calling an await function inside like another function, we have to make sure that that function is an async function, asynchronous function. Now our error is gone. It's gone. So let's go and see if our browser is now operating properly. Now let's refresh this page. Okay, now we can play the game again. Yay, the player has won. The score changes. It updates to 1. But now if I refresh my page now, we have an issue. The score disappears. How can we deal it? We can either use a database, or a simple way, since we're not going to get to that point of databases, a simple way that we're going to deal with this issue is now going to be, maybe we can have a button that resets this. Let's have a button that resets our sort of like board. So what we're going to do is let's add the button maybe here on top. It will have a refresh, same way as we did here as we have on our final code. So now how do we add that button? So let's go to our code. In our HTML, first we have to go to our HTML. Here on the game header, we're going to add that button. So what I'm going to do is we're going to say button, and then I'm going to put restart inside it. Let me save. Let's see how it looks on our code, on our browser. There we have the button on our browser, right? But we have an issue. We need our button to be this side, and we also need to have this on our button, right? So let's deal with that. Now let's go back to our, let's try it here first. Let's say maybe we can, again, I don't know why I love flex so much, but if I come here on this and say change this display to flex, you can imagine it now shows this here, right? So okay, cool. we'll deal with that. Let me copy this, then let me go to edit to the style. Remember, we change it on our game header. There, we have it on our game header. Now the next part now is to try and make it like show on this side. It is simple. What we can just do is to give this like the growth of 1, which is like it will take over, and then just leave a space of this one. So here this we're going to give it flex 1. Oh, guess what? We have the button there. Now let's go to our code and edit to our code. There we have it. And remember, let me save this first. Let me save. Now we need to also have maybe a class for this. Yeah, we can have a class or ID, but since we're going to select it later for the JavaScript to be able to interact with it, I say we'll rather go with an ID. So we're going to add an ID for it on our code. So we're going to call the ID of this. We're going to say ID would be equal to, we'll style this later on. For now, let's deal with the interactiveness of it. So we're going to give it a class of restart. Maybe, yeah, restart game. Let's say restart game. Now what we need to do next is to go to our JavaScript, and we now have to select this button and make it like for easy, like give it like some event listener, and then we're just going to do it here at the end of our game. We're just going to say document dot get element by ID. We're getting by ID, and we gave it an ID of restart game. We can just copy this, then paste it there. Then after that, we're going to say add event listener, and now the event listener that we're giving it is click, right? And then on click, it should run this function, which is right? And when we click that button, what needs to happen is to clear all these blocks here. We need to clear all these blocks here, and we also need to reset all the things that have been selected. We also say the game has to restart again, right? Great. So what we need to do is to say, let's go back to all these, need to go through all these squares that we have selected above there, then go through each and remove. Through each, we're going to remove the X's and the O's. So this is how we're going to do it. We're going to say square, like remember how we did it on the other one. So we're just going to say square, and then inside that, what do we do inside the square? We're going to say square dot class list dot remove, and inside here we're going to say O if it finds an O, it will remove an O, and if it finds an X, it will remove an X, right? But now we also have to reset this. So to reset this, we can just copy this, and after it has went through all the squares, we just say score returns to unselected. All the blocks will be unselected, and remember, we have to also reset this stop game variable. Then we're going to say stop game is false. We're going to keep this score as like this. Whatever it will be here, it will stay the same. Like it won't change. Maybe if it was on 1 at that time, it will stay on 1. If it was on 2, it will stay on 2, like that. So now let me save this. Right, now let's go to our browser. In our browser, let's see what happens. Let's do this. The computer wins. Oh, the score of the computer wins. But now we have to continue. We have to continue playing, right? Let me restart. It clears everything here, but the score has remained as at 1 because the computer is at 1. So now let me play. We have reached another point of this game where we didn't cater for it. What is that? When the game is a draw, what happens now? What happens when the game is a draw? Let's cater for that. The only time that we're going to check if the game is a draw is when it is the computer's turn to play, because you can see now the players, if like it is a draw, it means the players played more than the computer. Now there's no space for the computer to play. That's where we have this. So now we have to cater for this when the game is finished. So what do we this is the error that we had first, but we dealt with it by showing that the game should stop by the player winning or something like that. So now let's go on and play and check if the score has all the blocks have been filled, and if all the blocks have been filled and there's no winner, it means the game is a draw. Let's deal with that now. Let's go back to our JavaScript. Right before the computer plays again, right, we need to check if the length of this selected square of x plus the length of this selected squares of O is equal to 9. If it is equal to 9, the game has to stop. The game has to stop, and it has to say the game is a draw. Now let's deal with that. Let's say if selected dot x dot length, the length of this array, plus the length of this array, is equal to, we have to use three equal signs, is equal to 9. We'll say we have to put the curly brackets to show the block of the if statement. Game, stop the game is equal to true, and after that we're going to say alert. We'll say alert to say the game is a draw. You have to create a string in here. It's let's use two quotes. There's double quotes, and then say it's draw, and then after that we return. Let's see if we are lucky and then we manage to get to a draw time, like, and then we want to show. So let's save this. Let's go to our browser. Let's play again. Let's see. Yeah, it is a draw. It shows us it's a draw, and we don't have that memory like the maximum stack called and all that. We don't have that anymore, so we are sorted. Now we can just restart our game. Let's play. Let me beat this computer. Yay, the players won. The game doesn't continue, right? We restart. Let me try to lose. I'll try to lose. This computer doesn't let me lose. Okay, so it's a draw again. Let's restart. The computer wins. We are good now. Now let's deal with this restart button here. So let's add an icon for it to look the same as this one. So now I'll give you the SVG that I'm going to use. I'll share it on the course notes below, and then you will be able to use it. And this is what I'm going to do. So go to our folder where we have where I have downloaded my SVG, and then I'll copy it to the same folder as this image. I'll copy it to the same folder as this image. So that's what I'm going to do now. I have copied my image, my SVG for the restart button. Here it is. Now what I'm going to do next is to go to my code, and the same way in here, the same way I created this, I'm going to say image, then close it here. Then I'll say the source of the image is this one, so it will be images. Then I'll just select here. Then remember to also add the alt. Then I'll name it game restart. This is a fallback in case like this is not found. It will just write game start, and this also helps like for disabled people, like if they are failing to see, like they will be able to know what is there, because the computer can tell them what is showing there by maybe speech and all those things. So now we have that, right? Let's go to our site. Let's see what happens. Let's refresh. There we have it, right? But I don't like these border lines and all around the button. So what I'm going to do is, let's go to our code. Let's remove first. We're going to give this, we're going to select this. Let's select this, and then in here we're going to say remember to select to select what's this IDs on the CSS, we have to use hash restart. Now the next thing that we are going to do is let's make sure that we select it based on this, on this parent. Then now what we're going to do, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the background color, and I'm going to say it should be transparent. And the next part is to remove the border around the button. I'm going to say border, it will be none. Now another thing I think we should do is maybe let's change the cursor to show that okay, this is a clickable element. So let's see how it looks like. Let's go to our browser, let's refresh. There we have it. So if I click refresh, it will refresh. Let me see, it will refresh the game. Let me refresh. It refreshes the game. So I think we're pretty much done with our game. So our target was this, and just an extra, what we can do, we can also change this icon here. So the first thing I'm going to do is to go to where I saved the same icon here. Then I'm going to copy it to the same folder as all of this. So I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it. So here I am. I'm going to say, remember, I'm going to provide this for you, like on the show notes or on our course notes. So now we have this, right? Now let's add it on our page. To edit on our page, we're going to go to our code. Now the next thing that we're going to do is to use link. And then say link. We have it, but now this is not a style sheet, this is an icon. So I'm going to change it to icon. Then now what I'm going to do is to go to that folder, the images folder. Now we have it, there it is. So let's save it and let's see if we have our icon on our browser. Let's refresh. Yay, there we have it. I think this is all we needed to do to get started. We learned JavaScript, we learned CSS, we learned HTML. If you have any questions about this, feel free to ask on the course notes, and then I'll try to respond as much as I can. But I think this is all for now. I think I'll also add an extra lesson for GitHub for us to save our code on GitHub, and that way we'll be able to share it, we'll be able to show it to people. Oh, this is what I've done. And it was nice showing you how HTML, JavaScript and CSS work, like just the basics of web development. It was nice to introduce you to that. So from me to you, thank you for attending the lesson.